Hello, my name's Gav Cross, and I'm a storyteller, but every Monday, like I'm doing right now, I read supernatural stories live on Twitch. You could join me, link is down below. So I read a story cold. I've not read it before. It's a little test for me. Tonight, I'll be reading from this old 1980s Marks and Spencer book, 65 Great Tales of the Supernatural, and I'm going to read for you The Case of the Long Dead Lord by Dennis Wheatley. So, take some care. The Case of the Long Dead Lord by Dennis Wheatley. Read by Gav Cross. Thank God you've come, Bruce Hemingway cried as he gripped the hand of the little man for whom he had been waiting on the platform at Inverness. Your wire interested me. Niels Orson replied with a gentle smile. What's this about my being a naturalist? I'll tell you in a minute. Let's go over to the hotel. As the two men walked across the street, they made an oddly assorted couple. Niels Orson was small and lightly built, with transparently pale skin and large, luminous blue eyes. His domed head, with a high, intelligent brow and mass of soft, fair hair, appeared too large for his diminutive body. Hatless, dressed in pale grey, carrying a basket, conspicuously labelled Live Cat. He made a striking contrast to the tall, dark-haired American by his side. Over coffee in the hotel, Bruce explained, while the Siamese cat sat on the chair beside them, lapping cream. Archon Clyde, a friend of mine from back home, has taken Castle Stewart for shooting. I drew up the lease, and as the Clydes have never been in Scotland before, they asked me to see them settled in. And at the moment, that's just the old man, and who is completely absorbed in books and his glamorous daughter, Fiona. Their guests don't arrive for about a week. I've known the girl for some time. She's typical of her generation, sensible, a bit hard-boiled, but full of fun. Yet, when I arrived 2 days after them, I found her all shot to pieces. Well, that's puzzled me quite a bit. But the only thing I could get out of her was that for some time in her life she was suffering from the most appalling nightmares. The day before yesterday I took her a walk to explore the ruins of the old castle, which are some 2 miles away. Leading to it there's a lovely avenue of old beeches. We'd only got halfway along it when suddenly she stopped dead, and a queer look came into her eyes. I've been here before, she whispered to herself, and then she began to mutter in what seemed to be like Gaelic. I took hold of her hands and shook her, and she looked at me with wide, blinded eyes. As I called her name, the spell seemed to snap. She just said that she was tired of walking and wanted to go back. Maybe I'm wrong, but it didn't seem to me a case for an ordinary doctor, so I asked Archon if I might have a friend of mine who was a naturalist to stay a few days, because I didn't want them to know you are a ghost hunter. And why do you that night? Has anything happened since? The little Swede asked in his careful English that held hardly a trace of accent. No, nothing, except that she never goes into her room, if she can help it, and spends most of her time wandering alone round the grounds. Does she strike you as an imaginative young woman? Far from it. She has brains as well as looks, and graduated in law at Columbus. Niels leaned back, placing the tips of his fingers together. So she doesn't like her room. Have you been into it? Yes, I even spent the night before last there. But I slept like a top, and yesterday she insisted on returning to it. I can't understand it. I'm sure she's terrified of it, and yet she refuses to move. The girl may be abnormally psychic, as neither you nor apparently her father are in the least bit disturbed. Oh, I forgot one thing. She said that her door wouldn't stay shut. Well, the night I spent there, it didn't budge an inch. I know, because I fixed a piece of cotton over the opening, and it wasn't broken in the morning. At certain phases of the moon, perhaps, Neil hazarded, the force, if there's a force, might be stronger. Maybe, but she didn't sleep any better in my room. It's killing her, Niels. A few days ago she was at least scared and fighting it. Now she's just vague and won't talk. She looked like death at breakfast. But of course her father didn't notice anything. He was buried in some book or other. I don't like leaving her alone. If only I could get that dog to stay with her. What dog? The boarhound that belongs to the place. He liked her at first, but now he runs away as soon as she appears. Can people be possessed, Niels? Certainly, but we've hardly enough evidence to presuppose such a thing in this case. Miss Clyde sounds like a girl suffering from the species of nervous collapse. Of course, a place having the history of Castle Stuart would be filled with vibrations from the past. But apart from the dog's behavior, there's nothing to suggest that her condition is the result of psychic causes. I know, Niels, but I'll swear something queer is going on. 10 days ago in London, Fiona was a normal, healthy girl with bags of energy. Now she's a nervous wreck, and so washed out that one might even think that a vampire was sapping her vitality. Pasht closed his eyes and purred softly. Let us go, said Niels, to Castle Stuart. As Bruce turned the car into the gateway, the sun was brilliant over the Firth and mountain heads. He felt a little ashamed at having summoned the famous psychic investigator for so nebulous a purpose. The castle looked a mild architectural curiosity, but no more. There was nothing sinister here, where the drive wound among the sunburnished scrub and pines. Niels, with the cat upon his knees, glanced up at the brownstone battlements. But this is not very old, he said, smiling. Oh, no, only about 150 years. It's just a copy. The ruins of the original castle are about 2 miles away. It marks one boundary of the estate. In the great hall, sunlight stabbed the worn surfaces of ancient flags that hung motionless, drooped long, twisted shadows across the stairway. While the servants were taking up Orson's baggage, the Swede stood very still, his head inclined as though he listened. Bruce had left him to look for Fiona. He brought her through the garden door into the hall where she stood, bathed in the dusty sunlight, her golden hair responding to its caresses. But in her lovely green eyes there was cold and distance, as she shook hands with Orson. Her father rushed upon them from the library, American hospitality in every gesture. He was delighted to welcome Bruce's friend. Pasht was cute. He had found some interesting material in the bird life of the island, and the books were ready beside the sherry for the attention of Mr. Orson. But Niels refused the wine, and Bruce said sadly, I'm afraid he never touches alcohol. Throughout luncheon, Niels contrived to show a surprising knowledge of the purported subject, and Archon Clyde took to him immediately, but Fiona obviously found it an effort to concentrate her attention sufficiently to appear barely civil, and directly the meal was over, she excused herself abruptly. Afraid my girl don't take to this sort of life very easily, Clyde said in apology as the door closed behind her. I guess she finds it a bit dull after New York. I'll go and see if I can amuse her, Bruce volunteered. Niels made no sign. His small gnome-like figure remained bowed in contemplation. One hand was playing with a lock of hair. Bruce found Fiona curled up in a garden seat behind the castle. Sitting down, he said earnestly, Fiona, do tell me what's wrong. It's sticking out a mile that you've got something on your mind. No, if I tell you, you'll say I'm crazy. She turned away from him, and he saw the scarlet mouth tremble. I'm beginning to think I must be. No sane person would feel the way I do. She spoke in hard, strained voice, feel so haunted. As he remained silent, she went on desperately. Damn it, Bruce! The castle is haunted, and you know it. Why did you let Father bring me here? Bruce nodded. So, I was right. Now listen, Fiona. My friend Niels Orson is not really a naturalist, but the world's greatest psychic investigator. I wired for him when I saw how things were with you, and I'm darn glad I did, because if anyone can help you, he can. Let me fetch him. Then you can tell him all about it. I don't think anyone can help me. But you can get him if you promise that Father won't be worried about me. When Bruce returned with Orson, she was sitting in the same position, staring at the ground. She turned her head slightly as they sat down. "Give me a cigarette, please, Bruce." Her hand shook as she held it. "There's something after me in this place," she began. "It won't let me alone. I felt odd when I first saw the castle as we came up the drive. I knew just how it would look. That gave me kind of a shock. And I didn't tell Father, and I wanted to run away. I ought to go in or stay here. I lost the feeling a little until the evening. I was busy unpacking and getting the place straight then, when I was alone in my room, before dinner. The door swung open and suddenly made me jump. It was perfectly light. I could see nothing, but I was scared, and I ran out of the room. That damn door's been opening every night, except when Bruce slept there. And there's a queer, cold feeling in my head, as though I were forgetting how to think. All the time I have the idea that I know this place, that something is going to happen to me again. If only I could remember what. I might prevent it, but I can't. Wherever I go, the air is full of whispers, and I can't quite hear. And that was all. Until last night. "Last night?" Bruce repeated. "Yes. I was so frightened and wretched that I decided to sleep downstairs. I waited until you and Father were in your rooms. I thought perhaps the boarhound would be sleeping in the hall, so I stood at the head of the stairs and whistled to him, and from my room I left the door open. There came the most horrible chuckle, very hoarse and liquid. The thing was there. It was watching me, laughing at me. I could feel it." "What did you do?" Orson said quietly. "I heard the dog growl, and I ran down to him, but he was scared of something, and he wouldn't come near me. I stayed in the hall until about 4 o'clock. I couldn't sit still, and I couldn't sleep, so when the light came, I went for a walk. I got back about 7, had a bath, and came down to breakfast. Oh, God, I'm frightened, Bruce. I've never been frightened before. It'll get me and keep me forever and ever. Don't let it. For God's sake, don't let it." She began to sob hysterically. Niels stroked her hand soothingly. "I'll do my very best to help you, I promise. Meanwhile, I suggest that you come and lie down in the hall. You have nothing to fear for the moment, and you might be able to get some sleep." When they had made her comfortable, Bruce offered to show Orson his room. The manservant had unpacked all the suitcases, save one. "I kept the key," Niels smiled, "and I'll see to it later. It contains my cameras." Bruce had already seen the cameras in Orson's company on one of his strange adventures, but their process, Orson's invention, was a mystery to him. Niels explained them only by saying that their plates were abnormally sensitive. He said the same thing of his sound recorder, an instrument like a miniature dictaphone. Bruce wondered what his friend thought of Fiona's story, but knew from past experience that he would have to wait until the little man chose to enlighten him. "Where is Miss Clyde's room?" Orson was asking. "Across the passage, the second door. I'll sleep in it again if you like." Niels shook his head. "No, Pashto and I will occupy it tonight." He strayed towards the window and looked out across the firth to where the blue hills melted on the horizon. "What a history these moors could tell," he said thoughtfully. "Can you hear the swirl of pipes, Bruce? Or see the kilted ghosts marching up across the heather?" "No," said Bruce uncomfortably. "All the same, I'm jolly glad I asked you to come up here. I'll leave you now, as I expect you'd like to get your things straight." Bruce was a normal, practical person, but as he left his small friend standing with arms folded, heavy head sunk forward and eyes half closed, he thought, "Niels himself gave me the creeps at times." Fiona was no longer in the hall, and going outside he found her lying on the grass in the entrance of the wild garden. As he approached, she sat up and said coldly, "By the way, your friend is not thinking of spending the night in my room, is he?" "He certainly is." "Well, he won't find anything. Tell him not to fuss." She stretched her arms above her head. "I'm not worrying any more. I feel too tired to care." Bruce stared at her. He could hardly believe that this calm, aloof creature had been sobbing hysterically on his shoulder half an hour before. "Fiona," he pleaded, "there's one thing you must promise. Stick by me and Niels. We won't let any harm come to you." She smiled, queerly. "I think the harm has come to me already, and I'm living with it. But let me alone, Bruce. I'm not frightened any more." She turned away from him towards the house, but half an hour later Through sheer inertia, she had consented to move into the other wing of the castle for the coming night. "Everything is ready," Neil said to Bruce after dinner. "I have cameras fixed, and I've taken other precautions." He ran his fingers through his hair. "By the way, where is the girl?" "She's in the music room. I'll go to her, I think." "Let me. Without her knowing it, I may be able to strengthen her subconscious defenses so that she gets some sleep. You go into the library and talk to Mr. Clyde." Niels was gone as quietly as a shadow. On their way to bed, he halted Bruce at the door of his own room. "I'll come in here with you for half an hour, in case the servants are about." He shut the door and drew back the window curtains. Pasht watched him with colourless, unblinking eyes, as he added quietly, "There is something here." What do you think it is? "I can't say for certain. There are earthbound spirits which can do great harm. You've heard me talk of such things before, of the dark places where those who have not yet passed over must lurk, and long to return. Alternatively, although the place is not as old as castles go, it may have seen bloodshed, torture or murder done for power, cause vibrations and echoes that never die. If they can find some material thing to focus on, they may become evil entities of great power, and even materialize at times. I have not felt any strong evil here, but when I was with Miss Clyde tonight, I needed all my strength to resist the sense of bitterness, of seeking for justice, a cold, lost feeling at the heart. Perhaps that room," he pointed across the passage, "holds the secret. We shall see." "May I watch with you?" "No, I want you to go to the other wing and stay beside her door until it is light." While the hours crept by and silence held Castle Stewart as though with mighty hand, Bruce sat leaning his head against the lintels of Fiona's door. He had no sense of the ridiculous. At times he dozed. At times he watched the slowly gathering shadows that touched the angles of wall and stairway and crawled along the vaulted ceiling, swirling like an eddying tide around his feet. Twice the door at his cheek swung open, and he heard Fiona come to shut it. Down in the well of the hall, he heard the boarhound whining in its sleep, but no sound of alarm came from Fiona's room, and none came from the far side of the great staircase where Orson kept vigil. By 4 o'clock the short northern night was over, and having seen the cold grey dawn begin to steal through the windows, Bruce sought his bed. He slept late and found no opportunity to be alone with Niels until Clyde retired into the library and Fiona had set out on her morning walk. Niels looked pale and weary. His eyelids drooped. "There was nothing. Nothing at all. And you?" "Nothing." Her door opened twice, but she didn't look out. "Did she open it?" "I don't know. I heard her come and shut it. But this morning, when I asked her how she had slept, she didn't complain of anything." "I've never passed a night in a room so free of vibrations," the Swede said slowly. "It is most perplexing. Pasht, too, felt nothing, or he would certainly have shown it, and he is perhaps the severest of all tests, I think. I will spend the night down in the hall." They passed an uneasy day, and were glad when Fiona and her father retired to bed. Again Bruce kept watch. Again, save for the opening and shutting of the door, he was not disturbed, and in the morning Niels too reported an untroubled night. Fiona had now become so far withdrawn from the three men that, to Bruce's mind at least, she seemed to move among them like a spirit. She did not appear unhappy, but her wide green eyes were heavy and shadowed, contrasting violently with the transparent pallor of her face, and her lovely hair seemed to reflect the moon rather than the sun. She made polite conversation at meals and escaped after them. Every effort that Bruce made to talk to her was coldly received. At dinner on the third evening, Neil spoke only when addressed. For the rest of the time he was silent, his gaze fixed on Fiona. She had not changed from the tweeds she had worn all day, and sat calm and composed, her eyes staring vacantly at the table. "Only 6 days to the 12th, Clyde said. "I hope I shall have the pleasure of Bruce's company and yours, Mr. Orson, for the first few days at least." "Not mine, I fear," Orson said absently. "But you won't be leaving us so soon." "Tomorrow, I'm afraid." Bruce checked his astonishment. By no look, by no lift of the eyebrow or whispered word had Niels given him a hint. Fiona heard of Orson's projected departure without speaking. She ate practically nothing. Before coffee was served, she got abruptly to her feet and left the room. Her father stared after her with a worried frown creasing his forehead. "I think Fiona must have gone fey. She looks mighty queer tonight." Orson glanced quickly at his host. "Why should she go fey? Only Scottish people are supposed to do that." "Well, she is Scotch, or anyway a good half. Her mother was a McCain." Bruce saw that Orson's enormous eyes were gleaming with suppressed excitement, but it was not until they had left the table and were alone that he whispered urgently, "Her Scottish ancestry. I feel just now we should learn something important tonight. Quick, we must hunt the library for any books dealing with the history of Castle Stuart." For an hour or two, the men searched, dragging out volume after volume and frantically scanning their pages for a clue. They'd almost despaired when suddenly Orson gave a cry of relief. "This should give us a link we seek. It is the history of Castle Stuart, translated into English by Reverend Father Cox, chaplain to the castle from 1698 to 1717. He ran his finger down the index and, turning to a page halfway through the book, began to read. "Of all the lords of Castle Stuart, they do tell that Donald Stuart was the blackest of them all. He were fitter company for men-at-arms in their drunken brawls than for the fair young maid he did bring to his bride. She was Lady Fiona McCain, own daughter to the McCain of Graff, a winsome lass of 16 summers who did grief most sorely to leave her mother's side." "Good God," Bruce broke in. "Do you realize Fiona's mother was a McCain? And there's the extraordinary coincidence of the Christian names." "Of course," nodded Orson impatiently. "It's something of this kind that I have been hunting for." And he read on. "It becometh us not to linger on that mating, for a truth it was of an eagle and a dove, contrary to the laws of nature, and a thing offensive in the eyes of God. Poor maid, how could she find happiness with such a spouse? And who shall cast blame upon her that she did welcome the young Lord Ninan, when fresh from the court of France, and full of the graces of the French, he did come as a guest for a while beneath Black Donald's roof. Lord Ninan was a courtly, slender man, with smiling face and witty tongue. He did strum upon the lute for Lady Fiona's pleasure, write poesy for her, and in the French fashion oft did kiss her hand. Some say that no more passed between the twain than this, for well did the Lady Fiona know the jealous heart of her own dark lord. Yet on the night of feasting, so the tale is told, when the woman had withdrawn and the men were on her cups, Black Donald did suddenly miss the Lord Ninan from his board, and calling for his claymore, did stagger up the stairs to his lady's chamber. The lovers heard his loud approach, and knowing there to be murder in his drunken, vengeful heart, the Lady Fiona took Lord Ninan's hand and guided him by a secret stair behind the tapestry down to the inner court. But Black Donald knew well the secret stair, and swift for all the liquor he had drunk, followed, cursing upon their heels. They had but reached the postern gate when he espied them, and shouting to his men-at-arms, rushed after. Near by the well, Lord Ninan turned at bay, but the Stuart clansmen fell upon him, piercing him with 12 pikes and skein dews, so that he fell backwards over the well's rim, saving himself from plunging onto its rocky depths only by the clutch of one strong hand. The Lady Fiona screamed for them to spare him, but he knew his life was done, and as he hung there he cried aloud, "Fiona, I wait for thee, my darling." And then with one stroke did Black Donald slice off the clutching hand, and the young lord fell to his death in the icy water 60 feet below. 'Tis said that the Lord Ninan's spirit doth wait there, uneasy still, so that in passing the end of the avenue that leads up to that last grim stronghold, the belated traveller yet may hear the last laugh of Black Donald when his bloody will was done, and that last heart cry of Lord Ninan. "Fiona, I wait for thee, my darling. I'll wait for thee." Orson closed the book and stood up. The whole thing is clear. Now it may be a case of reincarnation or merely the McCain strain in Fiona's blood, coupled with her given name. The restless spirit of Lord Nynan still waits for his love to join him. This world is a misty, timeless place to earthbound spirits, and that of Lord Nynan cannot distinguish between our Fiona and the Fiona who lived 300 years ago. But it has become vaguely aware of her presence in the neighbourhood, and is using all the power it can command to draw her to it. Then her father must be told at once, Bruce said quickly, and arrangements made for her to leave Scotland for good tomorrow. Niels nodded. Yes, it is she who is haunted, not the castle or her room. That is why no manifestation occurs when she is not present. She must be got away as soon as possible, and in the meantime it is most important that she should not be allowed to go anywhere near the old ruin. The gravest possible danger awaits her there. If she were drawn to the place, it is a virtual certainty that her mental resistance would be overcome, and she'd feel herself compelled to throw herself down the well. Right, said Bruce. I'll go and tell her that you found the root of the trouble and warn her not to leave the house. He turned abruptly as Clyde came into the room, saying with a worried look, Bruce, I'm anxious about Fiona. The servants tell me she went out half an hour ago. She didn't even take a coat. It gets sharp at this time of night. I wish you'd go and... Before he had time to complete his sentence, Bruce leapt for the door, and they heard his footsteps thunder across the hall. Clyde had glimpsed the look of horror in Bruce's eyes, and now he saw the strained expression on Orson's face. What's this? What's happened? We can only pray, Orson said quietly. Bruce can run faster than we can. Please God he will be in time. Up the rough track, with the queer grey sky overhead and the lone moors hunched and darkened on either side, Bruce ran like a man possessed. A mist had risen off the sea. Rags and race of it danced on the air. Here and there it came down solidly. He stumbled and fell over a tuft of heather, and now the mist came more shrouding and more white. A curlew sobbed its cry somewhere in the silence, and the trees at the roadside geared their great arms heavenwards in mockery. He ran on, his breath coming in short gasps, knowing nothing but the blind necessity to be in time. As he topped the rise above the old castle, something told him he was too late. Down in the eerie mist he plunged and instantly felt a chill, as if a cold hand grasped his throat. He fell again, staggered to his feet, and ran on desperately across the turf. His footsteps dragged as though he was wading through a bog. The cold whiteness was all about him, and with the physical desolation there bore upon his brain another darkness, a sense of evil, too sickening to be borne. He was crouched and groping. He muttered a prayer that died in his throat. Out of the gloom and stones reared spectral and forbidding, Fiona! He shouted, Fiona! The swathes of fog beat at his face. Fiona! He called again. For God's sake, answer! Cold, he thought suddenly. Cold, cold, cold. A faint wind whispered through the ruins. He passed his hand across his forehead. He did not know what thoughts they were which seized his brain and cramped it until no feeling came to him but one of intense fear. He whispered louder. Now he was up again and running forward. The evil mist was throttling him, but ahead he saw the figure of a girl who stayed at the edge of a dark, yawning pit. The mist had become a solid wall blocking his way. The wind rose to a shrill scream. He shut his eyes. Oh, Lord God, help me, because, inspired by the words, came to his lips, because there is none other that fighteth for us but only thou, O God. Then the mist was rent as though two great hands had torn it asunder, and he was at Fiona's side, dragging her back. He felt her body fall limply against him, and now where the dark pit had gaped, there was only the shallow, rock-filled ruin of the old well. Lifting his head, he saw the mist had gone. Cool and grey under the evening sky lay the stones of old Castle Stuart. He stood there for a time, holding Fiona in his arms. She stirred and smiled at him. What happened, Bruce? Why are we here? He called me. Why did he call me so urgently? Why did he want me? He's gone. Did you send him away? She asked faintly. Thank you, Bruce. I think, he said, we should thank Niels Olsen. The Case of the Long Dead Lord by Dennis Wheatley from 65 Great Tales of the Supernatural. Read by Gav Cross. Hello, Jacob. I never look at the chat while I'm reading. It's nice to see you if you're still here. You see, if you watch this live, there is a chat. A standing ovation, a clap. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. How overly dramatic was that story? I thought it deserved an overly dramatic reading. If you want to join in the live chat, you should join us live on Twitch, 9 p.m. twitch.tv/GavCross every Monday. Guys asleep. Shh, everybody. Hush, little guy, now don't you cry. I'm gonna find you and murder you badly with a great broomstick in your eye, pushing it slowly into your brain. So sleep, little guy, but I'll find you. Even in the dark, I will kill you with my shoe. I will find you, this will be your last sleep, and nobody will hear you scream, not even a peep. Night, night, guy. Sleep tight. You need another S on the Gav Cross graphic in Canva. What are you talking about?